Ever get that feeling, like that little voice inside saying, okay, something's not right here, you know?
Right.
But everyone else is just kind of going along with it.
Yeah.
It's like, you're the only one who realizes the emperor has no
It's
clothes.
a classic for a reason.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. That line between, well, accepting what we can tolerate and taking a stand against what feels wrong, you know?
Yeah, it's that age-old question, right? Like, how do we balance our values with how the world actually works?
It's messy out there.
Totally.
And to help us unpack all of that, we're looking at an article called Get This, What I Could Tolerate.
Kitschy.
Right. And I'll be honest, this author, they don't pull any punches. Bold statements, thought-provoking
And
comparisons,
I like those.
even some Canadian history gets thrown in there.
Well, gotta have a little spice.
Exactly. But at its core, this article makes us think about those little compromises we make every day just to exist, you know?
Part of the deal, living in a society, I guess.
Right. And the author uses this, well, it's kind of a shocking image. Imagine a bunch of neo-Nazis,
Okay.
but they're living in total squalor, like swastikas on the walls, but the roof's leaking, the whole place is falling apart.
Wow. Yeah, you don't often picture that.
Exactly. It makes you stop and think, like, it's you really believe in a system
Right.
that leaves you in that state?
It makes you question their commitment, right?
Totally. And so that gets to the heart of it. How much are we willing to overlook just to keep things running smoothly? Especially if, well, the whole system is going in a direction we don't like.
Yeah, and that's where it gets interesting, right? Because this author, they're Canadian, and they're saying Canadians, at least in some parts of Canada,
Yeah.
might actually have more power to change things than, say, someone in the U.S.
Really? More power.
That's their argument. They bring up, for example, interprovincial tariffs.
Wait, tariffs between provinces. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh, yeah. It's fascinating. Up until relatively recently, Canadian provinces could actually put tariffs on goods from other provinces.
No way.
It's true. It speaks to how much autonomy these provinces have. And the author points to places like Alberta, Saskatchewan. They've pushed back against federal stuff like gun control, education. So it shows there's a potential path there towards more local control.
Huh. So instead of trying to change, like, the entire system, they're saying focus on what's around you, what you can actually impact.
Exactly. And this idea of effective action leads to a comparison that's, well, let's just say it got my attention.
Oh, hit me with it.
The pro-life movement.
Okay. Bold move.
Right. They're saying overturning Roe v. Wade. That wasn't like a mass democracy win. It was a small group, very dedicated, very strategic, who worked at it for a long time.
Wow. Okay, I see where you're going with this.
It challenges how we think about change, right?
Yeah.
Like we're always told, get the votes, be popular, that's how you win.
Right, right.
But what if there's another way? Not about being the most popular, but about being effective.
Yeah, that really makes you think. It's like we've been playing checkers and they just pulled out a chessboard, you know?
Right. And suddenly it's a whole new game.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, are we even focusing on the right things? Like all those big protests, the online campaigns, are those really moving the needle? Or is it more about, like the author's saying, smaller groups working strategically?
Yeah, it's a very different approach. I mean, part of me thinks, okay, if it's not about convincing the majority, doesn't that just mean the loudest voices always win?
That's the tension, right? Individual freedom versus, like, what's good for everyone if we ditch the whole majority rules thing? How do we make sure it's not just a free-for-all? How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's tricky. And it makes me think about all the times I've just gone along with something, even though deep down I wasn't okay with it. Just felt like, what's the point?
We've all been there. And that's where this idea of and the author uses this phrase, a tolerable existence, that's where it gets real. Like we all have our lines in the sand, right? Things we just can't compromise on.
Absolutely.
But living in a society means figuring out how to hold on to those values even when not everyone around you gets it. It's a balancing act for sure.
It is. And this article, it really forces you to figure out, what are those non-negotiables for me? What am I willing to put up with? And where do I draw the line?
Right. And the author, they actually give their own list, their version of this. A lot of it seems tied to being Canadian. Like they want a government that puts the country first, not just some ideology.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. They talked about just wanting to be left alone, like live their life, raise their family. The government should just back off.
That's a big one, right? How involved should the government be? Should they be telling us what to think, what to do? Or should it be more about just keeping things running and letting people, do their thing?
It's a question we're facing more and more, it feels like. Everywhere you turn, there's someone telling you the right way to think, the right way to act. It's
It's
exhausting.
totally. And while this author, they might not have all the answers, they're bringing up some important points. Like, yeah, you're not going to agree with everything the government does, but you got to figure out what you personally just can't live with.
So it's about knowing your limits. Like, okay, this world's a mess, but I can handle this much.
Exactly. And your this much is going to be different from my this much, and that's fine. It's not about everyone being the same. It's about, like, can we all just get along, even if we disagree?
Right. So picking your battles, knowing when to stand your ground and when to just, I don't know, let it slide.
Exactly. And maybe even more important, realizing that someone else is letting it slide might look different from yours, and that's okay too.
It's like finding that place where you can say, okay, this works. This is livable, you know.
Yeah, and it's a powerful thing to realize that, right? That tolerable existence. Like, it's not giving up. It's not ignoring the problems. It's more about, I don't know, accepting that we live in a world with other people, other viewpoints.
Totally. And those other people, sometimes they're going to disagree with us. Sometimes we got to work with it. And sometimes we got to, I don't know, pick our battles, like you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. Where do you put your energy?
Yeah.
And the author, they actually end on a pretty interesting note. They say real change, lasting change, it rarely comes from these huge movements.
Really?
Yeah, they're saying it's more about those small, super dedicated groups who really know what they're doing strategically.
Huh. So not just about being loud, about being smart about it, too.
Right. It makes you think, right? What really matters to you. And are you putting your effort in the right places to make that happen?
It's a good question. A good question to end on, I think.
Yeah, definitely something to think about.
For sure. Well, that wraps up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.